Hello and welcome to Partyline Chat. My name is Michael Finney. Today we're going to be talking about extended reality and cryptocurrency overlaps. Have a great panel of folks joining the discussion today. If you guys want to introduce yourself and your projects and talk a little bit about your background, anybody interested can go first.
Sure. The Bearded Bard, Daniel Delmar here. I'm the founder of VR Trend Magazine, physical VR magazine that we ship out worldwide, previously with Pimax and Facebook and High Fidelity XR. Right now, just concentrating on the magazine as well as doing some work for Plutosphere, which is a cloud computing service for VR users.
All right, cool. My name's Robert Rice. I'm the CEO of Transmira. We're developing Omniscape, kind of a full stack XR Metaverse platform that blends AR and VR together with a strong focus on location and monetization. And that pretty much consumes every waking moment I have.
Beacraft, CEO and Chief Futurist at Signal and Cypher, and as of also head of marketing at Update Beverage, new nootropic sparkling water. Folks, of course, digitally for DD.
Oh, you're breaking up a little bit.
Marketing to the metaverse.
Yeah, I didn't catch the last part of that.
Yeah, I'd say your last sentences kind of broke up.
All good. I said, yeah, as of about 3 weeks ago, also the head of marketing at a company called Update Beverage, which is a nootropic sparkling water. And I hope to use some of those future skills in their marketing more to the digital side and, of course, into the metaverse.
I'm hoping the interface sounds aren't coming in when I'm unmuting. And is Michael by chance at the case?
Loud and clear.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I should just leave the mic on. Or sorry, toggling it. Tweet. So my name's Devon Kennedy. I originally was producing AR content in this space, and on the side, I was doing electrical engineering for a skateboard company that I had started with my own design and everything. And I was like, what am I doing? This is ridiculous. Why don't I just build the headsets if I understand the full stack hardware and full stack software? So that's the trajectory that I have solved with respect to like a tailspin. It's going well so far. And I understood part of the premise of this conversation was to combine crypto. So Michael, correct me if that's wrong. But yeah, so I'm just doing hardware engineering at this point with respect to XR.
Was that everybody?
I believe so.
Okay, great. Well, I think maybe the person kind of most directly connecting crypto with XR would be Robert. He's got a really great project, and they had I don't know if it was necessarily a debut, but maybe a lot of attention recently at an event a bunch of folks went out to in Florida, Miami area, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did. Well, we've done a couple of different things lately, and I guess it's there's kind of a mix in here. So, one end with the stuff we did in Miami, we basically had what we call virtual goods or virtual objects, where kind of like a Pokemon Go for brands. So, we had these little 3D tacos and 3D pizzas kind of geolocated all over the area for people to find and discover with the app. They could pick them up and collect them. But then the idea was to drive that traffic over to local businesses. Where they could, redeem the 3D taco or whatever and get an actual, free taco. And kind of the business model there is, by being able to track everything from that first impression or discovery all the way through to the redemption of the transaction, ideally, on chain, kind of gives us the ability to go back to a brand and validate, hey, you spent X dollars on this experiential marketing campaign and we delivered these results to you. So, that ROI there and being able to kind of prove and validate it, I think is huge. And then at the same time, we've done some other, small conference sort of events where, conference sponsors had 3D logos instead of, a taco or whatever. But then those could be picked up, collected, and then that would result in an immediate deposit of whatever cryptocurrency into their user's wallet. And again, kind of just I don't want to say playing around, but really kind of experimenting in terms of what does it mean to have a 3D object? What does it mean to monetize it or tie it to a real world asset? What does it mean to tokenize it, and kind of all these things together, and really try to get ahead of the curve and understand where the metaverse is going, where the markets are going, and how all these technologies are kind of interrelate and play together, and try to do something that's sustainable future to kind of build out the big metaverse vision that we're all thinking of. I think you have to pay a lot of attention to the monetization side, and certainly cryptocurrency and blockchain are going to be two very fundamental pieces to that.
So can anybody download your app right now and test out what you guys have?
Yeah, you can download it, although it's not officially released yet. We kind of did like a special edition version for the different events. So for the one in Miami, that event is over. So no more free tacos. And the same thing for the other stuff. So if you do grab our app, you get to play around with a little 3D alien or a puppy or kind of a unicorn and take some fun screenshots. But that's kind of the extent of things right now until we turn on another campaign or activity. But having said that, we're launching a lot of stuff over the summer. I think probably by June 30th or maybe the first week or so of July, we'll be turning on kind of our version of virtual real estate. But then that kind of ties back into later when brands are paying to geolocate these branded objects. We're going to do revenue share with whoever owns those locations. So we've got some other things rolling out in August, September. So kind of like a really big launch is probably going to be around October, and everything over the summer is really for the early adopters or people that kind of want to get in and kind of just poke around with some stuff. So yeah, you can grab the app, but there's not a lot to do with it at the moment.
Yeah, I definitely want to play around with it. Just since we've been talking for a while, hearing about it, watching it develop, seeing the people kind of play around with the couple of animated characters and stuff that you guys had for the Bitcoin event was cool. I liked it.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it was kind of interesting because most of those it was just really simple. I mean, they have like idle animations. We didn't even fully animate them, but some really crazy stuff I think is just going to be going live probably at the end of July. I think that people are going to get really excited about.
What kind of business are you seeing quickest to adopt?
That's a tough one. So, when you look at metaverse stuff, right, and kind of like the bigger picture, pretty much pick an industry. I mean, I could sell this to cemeteries to some degree. So one of the struggles we have is that there's use cases all over the place. And, we try to communicate to people, hey, here's where we think this could be for your business or whatever. Investor guys, they either get really excited about it or they're like, oh my gosh, this is too big for me to wrap my head around. But to answer your question, I think in terms of the low-hanging fruit or where people are willing to spend money, brands certainly 100%. I mean, they're already spending a lot of money with kind of the virtual try-on stuff or scan a label and see something. And, we're showing up and saying, hey, you guys are doing it all wrong. Here's how to really engage people, really drive traffic online or to brick and mortar. And that's starting to get a lot of people to kind of wake up. So we're in the process of trying to do some really large national, campaigns, kind of like we did in Miami with the taco and the pizza, but think, multiple national brands, kind of rolling all out at once. Probably around October, and like a massive back to retail, here's the future sort of campaign. And we're getting a good bit of traction there. So I say it's probably the easiest. And then other areas that we're getting, a lot of these random inquiries from tend to be things like real estate developers or people that are, trying to, hey, our industry is dying. We got to shake things up. And I keep hearing about all this NFT stuff or this metaverse stuff, and somebody sent me one of your videos, can you tell me more? Can we talk about it? So yeah, we're fielding a lot of interesting calls from different markets, but I think marketing agencies, consumer brands, and oddly enough, commercial real estate stuff is really, I think, probably the main ones right now.
Very cool. You mentioned a minute ago, like there's, you're talking about how brands are kind of doing XR wrong in general, and that could be a conversation in and of itself. But I'm curious, what's the light bulb moment when you show a prospective brand or customer your product, and they're like, "Okay, I get it now."
It's usually the demo, right? Show always beats tell, and I don't know how many times I've just batted my head against the wall trying to explain things to people, over a conference call or Zoom or whatever, and you can just see it's just you're not sinking in. Once they actually see the demo, then like the light bulbs start going off. But the thing that really gets their attention is, we sit and we talk to them about, again, the scan and see, virtual try-on. This is all pretty good, but especially with the whole, scan a label and see something. That whole thing is interesting is that it still falls into a novelty category. There's no call to action. There's no transaction. There's very little, engagement past the first 2, 5, 6 times or whatever. And when we say, hey, look, here's how we're going to, here's an example. If I sent you a coupon in email, like a Groupon, buy one, get one free, you're probably going to put it in spam or you're not going to pay any attention to it. But if I sent you a 3D object of, say, I don't know, a pair of Nike shoes, and you could take that over to Foot Locker and, do the same thing, buy one, get one free. You are mentally and psychologically going to consider that completely different because it looks like an object. Mentally, it's like, hey, I found something. This has some value. I get to play with it. It's interactive. I can do something with it. I can give it to somebody else. And even if you gave it to somebody else, their response is going to be way different than you forwarding, the Groupon coupon for the exact same offer. So right off the bat, there's some very big psychological differences for having an object. But even then going past that, the whole point of that object is to be redeemed or exchanged or credited or whatever to actually turn into some real world value, which is way different from I'm going to scan, a Coke can, watch a little video of a polar bear walking around and then like it somewhere. I mean, okay, that's cool. I got some likes. I got some views. Maybe it got a little bit of social media traction. But again, there's no push for a sale. There's no extension. There's no, repeat anything once you've gone through that experience 2 or 3 times. So when you talk to a brand, it's hey, this is brand awareness, brand engagement. There's some long tail stuff here. There's some interactivity here. We've got repeat engagement, and we come back to you with a tremendous amount of user, data and behavior and activity, completely stripped of all the privacy stuff because we don't want to mess around with that. But for them to understand what works and what doesn't work, what people are engaging in, and what they like and don't like, and then ultimately see that increase in sales or that increase in exposure or even that increase in just brand prestige compared to scan a label and watch a video or like something on social media. I think they're beginning to understand that the power of this is pretty intense, and as a whole, the whole metaverse and digital economy, whatever, is still in its very nascent stages. But there's a lot of things that are happening, I think, that are going to be game changing for what we normally traditionally think of as advertising and marketing.
Here. To your point you made just a minute ago about scanning things and watching a video or essentially seeing something in new format, I feel like that's typically the way that so much of the evolution of technology happens. We tend to port what we knew about the past and what we know about the previous formats into whatever new format we don't really understand yet. And the problem is those user conventions don't translate well. If you're just scanning a video or scanning a barcode and then watching a video in 3-dimensional space in augmented reality, congratulations, you've technically checked the box on augmented reality, but you really haven't created an experience that is native to that space and that is engaging in a way that people want to continue to engage their brand. And that, in my opinion, can actually be damaging to your brand instead of actually endearing the customer or creating that expectation of your brand being forward-thinking and technologically adept. So I'm glad to hear that you're building an infrastructure that helps make a lot of this more native work possible, especially on the brand side. What gets measured gets made. So if you have analytics for it, I think that it'll accelerate the adoption curve of effective XR work instead of just XR work in general. So kudos to you, and I appreciate the work you're doing there.
Thanks. And I agree, 100,000%. I mean, it kills me when I see things like, I don't know, people talking about advertising, in games or in virtual worlds, and their immediate go-to is a billboard, I'm like, okay, you're still stuck in this two-dimensional windowed mode, right? So, and I actually saw one company recently that scored some funding because they're able to, I guess, track a user's eyes in VR so they know whether or not, the ad billboard was seen.
Was seen.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, like, dude, I'm running around blowing things up, right? I'm paying zero attention to your banner ad somewhere, and then it's like, it's just like with TV and movies. Would you prefer a commercial or would you prefer a very subtle product placement? Which is more effective, which actually, would be seen and recognized by the user or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's like you said, there's this sense of going back to the things that we know. And I don't know. Do you remember when kind of crypto and blockchain was first big? There was that tea company that just like added block to their name, and then
Yes.
they like, I mean, that's exactly it. You can't backwards engineer stuff. If you're going to play in the AR, VR, XR, Metaverse sort of space, you've got to think about things differently and really take advantage of the technology and build a native experience around it, and not just a novelty gimmick. Because to your point, I think brands do damage themselves if it's just this, more generic same old crap. It's like, no, give me something that's useful. And people like things that actually make sense and aren't just jammed or spammed on them, I guess.
I completely agree, especially when you talk about the idea of being able to create something native to a 3D space, or at least to XR. That's actually really challenging for a lot of brands. Thinking in 3D is a skill set that not only do most brands not have, but a lot of creatives find very difficult to grasp if they haven't done a lot of 3D work. Mm-hmm. It's not like you can just go from understanding layers in Photoshop to understanding how to build for a 3D environment or an entire new environment, or even just a 3D object that is going to respond appropriately in XR. So it's a whole different skill set, and a lot of people are struggling to be able to do that. So I'm glad to see that there's a lot more tools that are making this easy to do. I mean, Sketchfab's been amazing. There's a lot of other stock asset tools, but also a lot of infrastructure that's being built to make things like building an environment, placing objects, programming, and experience to be a little bit less arduous than it used to be. It's still got a long way to go, but I'm glad to see more and more platforms coming out to make it easier.
Blender is pretty incredible, but it has a steep learning curve, I would say.
Amen. Yeah, it is. I love the fact that it's free. Oh, amen. And it's incredibly composable and extendable, which I love. And practically every time Cinema 4D comes out with something, the Blender community responds really quickly with something new and oftentimes better, as long as you're willing to kind of sift through the interface. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Blender.
Yeah, advertising in the VR market space right now is a huge talking point. We had Resolution Games came out with a game called Blast On, and they put an ad in their game, the first little tester ad, and they had hundreds of people going onto their Steam page and review bombing them for that.
Wow.
Thought that, yeah. Well, I mean, their thought is, hey, it makes sense having an ad in a free-to-play game, but if I'm purchasing a game for $19.99, there's a little bit of I own it and I shouldn't be, expected to deal with that space, right? Same for, buying, when you buy an app on your phone, if you pay for the app and unlock it, the thought is you get that ad-free content. But looking at the way Oculus is doing it, stuff like that, it does not see that that's going to be the case, right? You can buy a $29.99 game and you're still going to have ads situated in that world. So it'll be very interesting to see how it's done. And like you were saying, I don't think they're not going to be pop-ups. They're not going to be, things that are just stuck in your view all the time. Initially, like the one on Blast On is just a banner, right? And you can choose to hide the banner, and you can click on the ads and choose not to see them, right? And all of these things, what they say is at the discretion of the devs, right? So the devs can choose if they want to take part in this ad service and generate extra revenue through the ads. So I think what's going to happen, and what I'm already seeing happening, is instead of putting the blame on Bliss, what people are doing is they're going at the devs. Why would you do this to your game? Why would you put this in your game? And I think it's going to create a lot of a lot of ripple effects within the community itself. So it'll be interesting to see once it rolls out what actually happens.
I agree. I think if I had seen them put a little more thought into this and seeing how they could integrate the ad more natively into the environment and into the gameplay so that it made sense, I don't think they would have gotten carpet bombs the way that they did. But this does feel like a VR version of a banner ad, and none of us like banner ads.
Well, what I don't get, and me not being a developer, right? So what I don't get is like our magazine, we sell ad space, right? If I were an independent developer of a game like, say, Space Pirate Trainer or Pro Putt Golf or something like that, I would go out and find those advertisers on my own. It'd be really easy to say, hey, 30,000 people play my game on a monthly basis. I have banners in the background. If you pay me X amount, I can put your name on there for people to see, and then they can tailor it to match the game, right? So, the ad could be VR related or golf related if it's a golf game, and you're not just going to get random ads based on your location. And I think that would be more beneficial to a developer, and I think the community and the players would appreciate that and realize, this guy's selling his ad space to make extra money, to make the game better, but it's not just feeding us local ads into the game, and it's not going to come across that way. So I guess it's easier just to hit a play button and expect extra income, and I can see the desire to do so. But yeah, man, it's wild. What we get a lot now is, because I do the cloud computing, is people using cloud PCs to play their Steam VR on their Oculus Quest, because if you're playing through Steam VR, then you're not subjected to those ads.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, especially when you see your first ad as Jasper's Market again.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have.
What they're thinking.
You have to think about it, right? I mean, we're gonna have an ad. Someone's gonna side quest or side load an ad blocker, right? I mean, that has to be a thing that's just gonna happen. I assume at one point. But yeah, until then, and I think it's going to be a relatively slow rollout, because the devs that we're talking to, the ones that are in the magazine, they're all saying that they're going to be hesitant because of the backlash so far. So
that makes a lot of sense.
Well, that brings to mind a question then. So when we look at the metaverse in its most broadest possible definition of all the things, is there maybe an opportunity here to kind of redefine what advertising is in general and maybe look at more marketing? I mean, do we really need to have the traditional, advertisement per se, as opposed to other things? Well, yeah, insertions. But I mean, it's like, are there other ways to get brand exposure and brand awareness, whatever, without a discrete advertisement for a specific thing? So, for example, if you gave me right, but if you gave me a pop-up that said, hey, you can buy a bunch of extra, golden gem star or whatever things to power up my character, and there's a bundle deal sponsored by Coke, I would be way happier to have that than a 4-second interstitial with somebody drinking a Coke in front of me, or some other thing where there's game content that's tied to or related to or sponsored by, or whatever, with the brand that enhances the game experience, as opposed to this interruptive sort of thing that I'm going to try to block or avoid or ignore completely. And I think that, especially with so much of things going to this 3-dimensional sort of thing, whether it's full on VR 3D or your typical 3D game or whatever, even a top down 2D game still is different from a flat page in a newspaper sort of thing. I just wonder if there's not some room to really kind of redefine what advertising is and get away from the one-way broadcast passive experience of an advertisement and turn it to something that's more useful.
As an advertising guy and a marketing guy, I would love to see a feature like that. Unfortunately, I don't see it ever fully replacing the interruptive placement, but I would love to see more and more people start to understand how their content can play natively in a way that enhances an experience. And I think that the first salvo of that was the whole native content boom, which unfortunately became, the editorial online, and it started to blur the lines of what's actually good journalism. Mm-hmm. But when it goes beyond that, you actually find people who are starting to find ways to integrate with games in really natural ways. It doesn't happen a lot though, because most marketers are thinking of things in a way of what are my placements, what's my cost per acquisition, what's my CPM, and what are my efficiencies, and they're looking at things that are able to scale. And native placements like that, by definition, don't. They're supposed to be a little bit higher level effort. They're supposed to be tailored more to the specific audience that is going to be seeing it. And it also requires a lot more effort on the part of the publication to help make sure that it does fit. Now, it's far more tailored to that audience, so therefore it's going to be a better, higher engagement and a much stronger impression. But as an advertiser, you're often looking for how can I get the biggest reach. If it's an awareness campaign, if it's more around something like loyalty or engagement, then I'm willing to spend more time and more money to do that. And just being able to do that at scale is a lot of work and a lot of money. It gets expensive real fast.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just the reality on the marketer side. Personally, as a futurist and VR XR guy, I would love to see it. You know, when you put your consumer hat on, you're no longer a marketer who thinks about your brand 24/7. It is nice to have experiences that are enjoyable.
Yeah, I just hope we don't end up with Max Headroom's blip farts.
You know there's going to be somebody who recreates that.
100%.
I'll buy that NFT just for shits and giggles. Speaking of NFTs, I'm curious where everyone's heads are at right now with given the complete implosion on the art side, but given the incredible utility of the asset itself. I mean, there's so much to it in terms of the stuff we're already talking about. What kind of things have you been seeing ever since the speculation market seems to have kind of evaporated?
The real artists are still working on their art. I'd say that's still happening. That's positive.
Which I'm incredibly grateful for, yeah.
A lot less 24/7 hype coverage of the NFT marketplace and what it's doing and who is doing things with whom. So I think that's kind of...
Does that mean I could hop on Clubhouse and like actually see a room that's not dedicated to NFTs?
You might.
Right. Oh man, yeah. Now it's just BitClout and NFTs, both of them together.
Oh man, wow.
I don't.
We've hit peak douchebag.
So, you know.
No, not at all. But there was a point where I had to go onto my Twitter and you know, kind of just get rid of the word NFT because it was popping up so much. Yeah.
Smart.
I see it, and there's, you know, people are trying. I mean, there's a lot of people who are trying to incorporate that into the metaverse, right? Through, not just 3D art, but avatar creation and avatar clothing and avatar animations and just different things like that. Since it's very easy to rip off a 3D avatar and something like, VR Chat or Neos VR or something like that. So there's definitely value, in the blockchain, especially in the metaverse. But I haven't seen a proper way for it to be implemented yet.
I'm with you 100%. Personally, I think, and I'm going to get heady here, but I think that the NFT is the atomic unit of the metaverse. It's really, to your point, Michael, it's just a smart contract that allows different things to happen. But I am really interested to see how quickly the functionality it starts to develop, but also when the infrastructure is set up for more fluid cross-chain transactions, being able to have these NFTs and smart contracts be portable across different environments, different infrastructure, different blockchains. I think that's when we're going to see an explosion of the real utility. And I also think that's when a lot of the speculation will come back, probably in a much healthier form. But I'm really curious to see how that also impacts other experiences beyond things just like digital assets. Because at that point, now you're starting to get the opportunity to start to collateralize even more real world assets and tie them into virtual experiences versus just having virtual experiences tied to physical events. So I'm really curious to see how all of that develops because there's an enormous amount of potential there.
Yeah, I 100% agree on the NFT, kind of being the atomic unit. I think it makes a lot of sense. They don't have to be the single one-off unique there's only one of these in existence, but just a method of tokenizing something where, it's got that provable provenance. You can track where it came from, where it's been, what it does. You can't copy and, fake it or cheat it. That's important on the monetization side, like I talked about earlier with virtual goods, but also for a lot of other things like identity and whatnot. So I think 100% behind you there. And then I think that we're probably going to see a couple of different cycles over time. We've had this initial, oh my God, NFTs are amazing. Let's all spend millions of dollars for it. That's probably going to happen 5 or 6 more times. And I think you're going to see, a few siloed, walled garden, whatever things for the next maybe, 1 to 3 years until that, like you said, that kind of standardized cross-platform, cross-world interoperability sort of kicks in. And I think that's really where we're going to see the bend in the hockey stick. But also to answer like one of your earlier questions, part of some of the interest that we're getting from the commercial real estate side of the fence is also on this NFT side. How do you represent ownership of a physical asset like a house or an apartment in a bigger building, or some other sort of thing, whether it's a one-to-one ownership or it's a fractional ownership, or can I track the tax record and maintenance record of this sort of thing and kind of know for sure that it is what it is. I think there's going to be a whole lot of emergent applications and use cases for NFTs. And right now it's just a lot of people it's kind of like the original heady blockchain days, stick NFT next to your name and people throw money at you. That's the cycle that we're at for the next, 6 to 12 months. But I think there's been enough happening in the last maybe 4 or 5 months where there's at least as far as I can tell, a lot of smart people are really starting to buckle down and hide in their basements and really think hard about business models and use cases. Where can this concept of tokenization and NFTs really go, and let's build out something that's actually useful. So
Here.
I'd like to hear a little bit about hardware and how the different devices or technologies affect what you guys are developing, or how you can deploy projects and things like that.
you want to direct that one to somebody specific, or?
Anybody can jump on it. I know you have, you're mobile already, so that might be a good place to start. But definitely, I think in terms of at least augmented reality versus virtual reality, there's a hardware comparison to be made there. But yeah, feel free to start.
All right. Yeah, I just didn't want to do all the talking because I'm really excited about this stuff and I could talk for hours. Yeah, so I get this question a lot, especially from investor guys, and kind of my perspective is my goal here is accessibility and scale. At the end of the day, I really want to be kind of agnostic. I don't care if you're Android or iOS, or I don't care if you've got Apple glasses or Oakleys or any of that other sort of stuff. But at the same time, if I came in to this meeting and said, "Hey guys, here's a PlayStation 27," and there was like no content for it, you'd be kind of put out. So kind of our goal is to do what we can do, but keep an eye towards the future. So as we're developing stuff, we want to make sure that when something new like the Apple glasses or whatever comes out, they can immediately just plug in and kind of access all of our content. So we're not developing specifically for hardware. I mean, there's already 1.8 billion AR-ready mobile devices that are out there. That's the market we want to go after. And then if people have higher-end stuff or the magic glasses, then they'll get a better experience. And the same thing too on the VR side. And I always try to make the distinction between 3D and VR. I mean, they're effectively the same exact thing, except VR has the head-mounted display and maybe some hand control devices. But if you set that aside as just another access method, everything else is still the same. It's 3D is 3D. So we build our stuff that designed for, a browser access or for, a desktop application or whatever. And then there just happens to be extra user interface options if you do have a head-mounted display or something. So we try to be a little agnostic and not limited, but at the same time, if somebody's got the hardware, and we want to make sure that you can get the most banging experience with it.
To your point about content a minute ago, I think there's a lot happening in the consumer space too that I think will make 3D worlds a little more robust, and the number of assets usable to creators and developers far more viable, because I'm really excited to see what Apple is doing with things like their object capture API and making things like scanning so much easier on their phones, because 3D is, I mentioned this earlier, it's tough to learn 3D, but if every single consumer has access to a LiDAR on their phone, and if you're a developer, you have access to something like their photogrammetry API, all of a sudden a whole pipeline for being able to develop 3D assets becomes available to you, and 3D content just starts to explode. And all of a sudden you get to a point where UGC becomes part of your XR experience, kind of like we saw with Instagram. And I think that we're going to see a really interesting development in terms of XR and 3D content, like we did with Instagram. When Instagram became big, all of a sudden everybody became a photographer, and also DSLR sales exploded. And all of a sudden you saw this revolution of amateur photographers starting to build a name for themselves and becoming influencers, and the content explosion began. Of course, the bar of quality went way up in terms of what was considered average to build a following. And I think something similar will be happening with 3D in terms of all of the tools are now becoming available and making it easier to go from knowing nothing to being able to kind of cobble together some sort of viable experience. And those who put a little more effort into it will be able to create something really compelling. And for example, if you wanted to use the photogrammetry API, you can transfer your EXIF data, which has the gravity, it has location information, it has the positioning. Then you just transfer that over to the high resolution DSLR pictures, and you have something incredibly high resolution and a really easy pipeline to build. You've got great assets that you can port into almost anything you want. And now the developers aren't responsible for coming up with all of the assets that their players can use. And UGC becomes part of almost like this community element of gaming and XR experience.
Yeah, I think there's something there too when you look at like the mod community for games, right? Game comes out and 3 months later, you head over to Nexus Mods and download somebody else's texture pack, and their visuals are way better. Like, well, why wasn't this guy hired by the developer to start with? I think if we, as platform designers or infrastructure or whatever, I think if we kind of get to this point where we abstract out some things. So let's say I have a chair, and I'm tokenized this chair, and it's got a certain set of behaviors and properties to it, right? My avatar can sit in it, I can pick it up, I can move it around, I can stand on it. It's effectively a chair. I think that's important. But then I think you can abstract out what the chair looks like, and then have 55 different either models or textures or whatever, some user created, some not user created. It's still functionally a chair, and that's important on the interaction side. But being able to change the visuals of the chair, I think that kind of just like the mod community does. I think that's going to have an effect, and that may also include mapping of a location. Mapping is going to get interesting over time as users start mapping their homes or whatever. But there's certain use cases where I need like a super high fidelity, highly accurate, millimeter scale digital twin of somewhere. In other cases where I don't care as long as it's accurate down to the nearest foot. But being able to have users that kind of go in and upload their own content in terms of how something looks or even maybe interacts, I think is really kind of interesting and can kind of open up a whole lot of other user generated content markets as well.
Does that make sense? That's a world I look forward to. Absolutely.
Cool, because then at that point, great content rises to the top of the stack, even though you're not necessarily changing the native what the chair actually is.
And I think that gets to a lot of the hesitation for a lot of developers and game platforms of allowing UGC to be part of that process, because you have to police the content in some way to make sure that, okay, if I have an aesthetic that's like Fortnite, I'm not doing something that's super photorealistic, or I'm pulling the style from Destiny or something like that. You have to make sure that it makes sense to the game, unless that's part of your governance, where we really just don't care what kind of aesthetic or what kind of functionality you're bringing into it. So I think you're speaking some really interesting stuff.
Yeah, well, this is kind of where. Well, no, that's actually it's a really interesting point. But this is where I think what the user experience is a little different, and why I think, at least from what we're trying to do, ultimately is to abstract out things. It's like you and I can both be in the same environment and doing the same thing, and again, we both see the chair and it's the same chair, but you may have turned on a theme or something where it's a Star Wars chair, or it's a Game of Thrones chair, or it's an evil demonic chair that bleeds on the floor or whatever. And only you see that because that's your filter. So a brand like a Fortnite or something can still maintain whatever for generic users, but you as an individual user should be able to turn on your own filter or your own lens, and then maybe customize the heck out of it and then share that with your friends. I mean, I don't know. There's different ways to look at this in terms of individual users or thematic aesthetic layers or whatever, or some other thing that I haven't figured out how to make up on the fly. But I mean, is what I'm saying is like there's a lot of fertile ground here that hasn't really been touched upon yet, and I think that a lot of this is we just have to build it and just see kind of what emerges and what people do and want, and as long as we're still open and adaptable, and I don't know. I just think the future is going to be really interesting over the next 2 or 3 years.
I'm excited for it myself. I'm really interested though. Like, it seems like to me the game world has become so much more relevant over the last decade, and particularly the last 2 years become incredibly hot in terms of where all the focus is, because there's so much that can be done in terms of what you build in a game engine. I mean, even entire economies have been developed in games for years now. I feel like the games and game engines are going to be almost the testing ground for experiences in the real world. I can even see it being a testing ground for different types of economies, different structures, different foundations. What are your thoughts on leaning to the metaverse for almost like an experimentation on what can actually happen in the real world?
It's happening, and I've started to see a lot of discussion on this in like the last maybe 5 or 6 months in terms of the new digital economy or the new virtual economy. For years, I mean, gosh, even going back to I remember back in like the early mid '90s playing text-based, MUDs and spending money to get in-game currency to some other guy that slaved over it for a while. And this has been a thing that's been going on for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And I think now, if you're familiar with like Piers Kicks or some of the other people that are really active in these virtual economies, or what's happening over like with Axie, for example, you've got people in the Philippines playing this game, breeding things, and whatever. And instead of working $5 a day, they're making $500-600 a week or more. Basically gathering game assets or rare things and selling them to other users. And I think that's going to explode when the metaverse, kind of starts rolling out. Here's one example I'll use, because it's something that we're very motivated, interested in, and trying to work on. If you think, for example, if you take a digital twin of a mall somewhere, so nice, it looks like the mall, it's the same mall, it's 3D. I can explore it. We'll use Unity or Unreal. It's got a 3D, whatever. That's pretty cool and fun, and it's nice to be able to walk around it with my little avatar. But it's even cooler if other people are there. So now we're all hanging out at the same mall. Maybe it's the St. Matthew's Mall in Louisville, Kentucky, or something. We're all just kind of wandering around having a good time. But if you enable some commerce there, where each of those individual store tenants can interact with you and sell you stuff, that's really cool and amazing. But what really kind of jacks this to a whole nother level is if you've got somebody in another country. Let's say you've got your single mom with 2 kids in the Philippines, who creates an avatar, goes over to the Mall of Kentucky, kind of learns English, starts making some friends, and then starts working the third shift at Macy's, selling merchandise to some guy in Russia that happened to log in, who happens to want a pair of a T-shirt or something for U of K basketball team sold in the the local sports store. When you see that sort of thing starting to happen, where you've got, multiple people across the globe effectively transcending borders to, find jobs and gain income, interact and socialize with other people, and really engage in commerce, multiple different levels. I think that is where the sense of digital economy that we see in games the whole play to earn sort of model, or whatever. I mean, all these things are kind of coming together. I think it's going to be just this dramatically disruptive thing globally, and really getting back to kind of what we all expected for the internet and the web to be the great equalizer. I think we haven't even begun to see how amazing the ultimate metaverse is, going to be there. And probably the earliest, I guess, example of this in terms of the mass market was Ready Player One, watching how the characters had their day jobs in the metaverse. I think that's absolutely coming, but there's going to be like 55 different ways to do that.
That's funny you mentioned that. So the way I got started in VR was my day job was in the metaverse. So I started working for High Fidelity VR before they transferred over to a spatial audio platform. And people would ask me, what do you do in VR? And I told them when I told them I worked in VR. And I literally would, for 9 hours a day, put on my VR headset and stand in a welcome room and welcome new users into VR. I think that was my day job, which was extremely cool to talk about, but a lot of ice packs on my neck after a long day. So.
That and some ice drain. Damn.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, man. It was rough, but it was so fun. It was just such like a weird experience, because I'd be in there for 8-9 hours, and I'd come out of VR and I'd go to walk around my room, and it would feel like that sensation you get when you're like you first get off a treadmill after running.
Yeah.
And it's just like, dude, what is going on?
Mad respect, man. 100 mad respect.
It was a good experience. But yeah, I think that's coming more and more. I think we're going to see, especially as like VR's used more towards when VR and AR and all that stuff incorporates more. I think there's a lot of things, even probably already, that you can do in within VR. I know that as far as industry, like GE General Electric's using it for all their underground transformer training and all that sort of stuff. But then they're starting to look at it from a security perspective. Hey, here's a substation. Something's going on at the substation. We have a 360 camera in the middle of the substation. You have a guy 40 miles away, puts on a VR headset, and can manually look around that space, right? So I think we're starting to see that incorporation come in a lot more. And to me, that's the most exciting thing to see, is people who finding ways, solutions to utilize it, and then see the value in it, because that's going to help everybody involved.
Absolutely. There's an enormous amount of awesome stuff happening from a corporate space as well. And I'm also excited to see more and more creating happening in VR, because I really do believe that creating in a tool that's not native to the medium can create all sorts of issues. It's possible, but it just reminds me of my days at agency when I would see people developing apps and websites and then just showing it to the client on like reams and reams of poster board in his PDF. All I could think is like, this doesn't work, people. You need to experience things in context and see them in context to understand how your end user is going to use it. And now that we have more and more robust tools developed in VR, I think that there's a lot more that's going to happen. I really do think that's going to have a massive impact on the quality of the interactions in VR.
Yep, I agree.
Yep. Same.
What are some of the tools you guys have played around with in VR that you'd like so far?
Are you talking about from a developer standpoint or just from a creative?
More from a creative standpoint, yeah.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think a lot of people in here are familiar with, Tilt Brush and Sketchfab and all those sort of tools that go on. But what I'm using now is I mentioned earlier, I'm doing stuff with Pluto Spheres. I'm getting deep into the just utilizing cloud computing for virtual reality and seeing kind of how far you can take that. So if you have, say, an Oculus Quest and you don't have access to a gaming PC, but you want that more high-end experience, or you want to play applications that aren't really on a Quest or standalone device, you can literally just go on your phone, turn on your computer, and then access all your Steam devices from a virtual PC in your headset, and you can play all your Steam VR games directly on your Quest, bypassing, all the kind of Quest operating systems. So for me, that's been kind of what I've been playing with, is seeing just how far you can take that, because you're now using a cloud PC to that. You can also, do different things. Like I can be in VR and log on to my Clubhouse now and be listening and talking in Clubhouse while playing Beat Saber or while doing something else. And then I'm messing a lot with, multi-app launchers. So being in a 3D environment and bringing in multiple XR applications at once, using Chimera and Metachromium and Pluto VR to kind of add networking capability to any program. So, if someone in here creates an XR app and they don't have any networking capabilities, you can essentially just boot up Metachromium from Steam and Pluto from Steam, and those two things working together allow you to just bring someone into your world. They can interact with any WebXR experience that you spawn in there with you. They can look at 3D models. They can import stuff into the world, and you can stack multiple XR apps on top of each other. So for me, it's figuring out, I've been messing around with the use cases for that. It's been really fun. Yeah.
What have you seen as far as like what works well together when you're stacking multiple XR apps on top of each other?
Yeah. So, actually we tried to do like a mock a podcast a few days ago where we were in a room in virtual reality. There were about 7 of us in a room. We each spawned in our own WebXR models. So I, pulled in a model of a chair to sit on, a gaming chair, and someone else pulled in a LiDAR scan of their backyard, and someone else pulled in a photogrammetry scan of their bedroom that we were all sitting in. And we could all see this and interact with it. And then while we're doing that, we were all piped into Clubhouse in a Clubhouse call, all able to talk to each other using Clubhouse as the audio. Right. And it was just a kind of a unique experience. We're able to pull people up from Clubhouse, spin up a virtual PC. They can hop in their Quest, jump on virtual desktop, and then just log right into our world. And it's not a platform, right? It's just a spun up space that WebXR space that you're just jumping right into. So I don't know. It's kind of a unique experience, but yeah.
I was there. It was super cool. I still have to do that aggregate tweet, Daniel. And what I had done in that room at that time is, because Apple has picture-in-picture, I basically loaded the I was gonna say real life experience. It wasn't. It was a metaverse, let's say remote meeting, and then would watch it as I'd see each person light up, the gray beige ring around on Clubhouse. Their profile would just illuminate or, dissipate. And it was really cool to be like, all right, now I'll talking, now Michael's talking. So that was really cool. I still have to put that tweet up, so I should do that today.
Yeah, it was interesting, just like, it's being in there, and like when we had Victoria come up and just onboarded her on there directly. And it's giving me so much ideas for new use cases, right? Because previously to that, I didn't really give much thought into WebXR, into WebVR platforms. But utilizing something like this, if you're someone creating even an augmented reality experience, you could essentially, load up a room, invite some people into it, and just load your AR package directly into it, and do that AR program in a virtual environment, right, and test it out. So there's really weird use cases that and I'm sure there's a lot of use cases that I have no idea about, because, like I said, it's not my expertise. But just having the opportunity to kind of just see what's possible, which I think for all of us, is the most fun about this space and this industry, is it's still relatively new. So the opportunity to find new possibilities and new way to integrate is always changing.
I love the creativity. That sounds like a lot of fun. And you mentioned Victoria. Was that Victoria Modesta?
Oh gosh, I don't remember.
I'll definitely check that out.
Yeah, it sounds cool. Sounds like you guys kind of hacked everything together and made it work.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. It was how many our goal was to throw as many things, as many different WebVR profiles on as we could. We were using I have 4 different cloud computing or cloud computers, virtual machines to run as cameras that you grab, move around, and manipulate, and then the clubhouse and the sound integration. And it was definitely just a piecemeal, just piecing everything together and just hoping that it worked. But it created a lot of opportunity for what else could this be utilized for. And the first thing I thought was, well, if you're a newer developer and you're creating an application and don't really have the resources or time or know how to incorporate networking into it, you could use this to bring people into your space right away, right? Show them what you're working on, collaborate, and do that sort of thing without having to incorporate any of that. So, yeah, it's super interesting. So that's kind of where my mind's been at lately, as far as being creative within VR. Other than that, obviously just magazine stuff, and my main goal is to learn how other people are being creative in VR. So
I love it. It sounds like a great time and a recipe for a headache at the same time.
absolutely.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the magazine?
Sure. Yeah. So almost a year ago, about 9 months ago, we started had this idea to, we grew up with gaming magazines, Game Informer, PC Gamer, all that sort of stuff, Nintendo Power. And we were like, dude, how cool would it be to have a magazine that was just based on, VR tech and the VR community. And we kind of just log and preserve how the evolution of VR is happening, right? So people could come back 10 years from now and look at these magazines and be like, oh, this is what was going on back then. This is how this got started, blah, 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 blah. So we started a virtual magazine a physical magazine with really no large expectations. We're like, you know what, we'll do it amongst the Twitter community, and maybe we'll get 15, 20 people to, want to buy one of these magazines that we can sit on our coffee table and look at, and it'll kind of be, nostalgic and fun at the same time. And then after the first issue, we quickly realized that there was a lot of people who are interested in this sort of thing. We started it right at the beginning of the pandemic, and I think there were a lot of people who were at home and looking for new things and new outlets. So we opened up the magazine as a community curated magazine, and we let literally anyone in the VR community who wanted to share their voice or share their opinions or share their projects or share their creativity, write for the magazine and input content for the magazine. And we found that through doing that, we were able to kind of just build our base up quickly, because a lot of people, there's a lot of people that have a lot of things to say and might not have the platform to say it. You might have an independent dev who's working on a project, or a charity company who's working on a project, and they're not particularly strong in the social media or the Twitter aspect of it. So to be able to hop in the magazine and go to people that are very interested in VR, because it's a niche market within a niche market, so we kind of just held on to that. And then we grew, and now we're in a bunch of VR arcades. We shipped to over 22 countries. We're looking at contracts for full distribution into like Barnes and Noble, and we're just a team of 2 people, and we're putting this magazine together and spending all of our time and energy and just try to make it something special. So it's been so fun, because I literally all day, every day, just get to talk to people and hear about the new stuff they're doing, not just within VR, but how it's being utilized in the industry. Like companies like World for Peace, who are using VR in Africa to have rival tribes and in villages communicate to each other through VR. So they're not put in harm's way, and they're not in person, so they can have these conversations about what's going on in their villages and what they disagree on and what they agree on, and just weird use cases like that I think a lot of people who think of VR don't think about, and they don't wrap their head around the different possibilities you can use it for. VR in the industry for training someone how to rig up an underground transformer and still stay safe, or how to run a crane, and all this sort of stuff. So it's been really interesting and fun. It's been a really cool journey for me and my business partner Cody to kind of just ride the waves and try to make this like the best magazine we can. So we're getting ready to launch issue 5 now, and then issue 6, which will be our year issue, because we ship out every 2 months. So it's been a blast, man. It's been a blast to meet people and see the creativity and just hear about all the new things that are going on. So fun.
Congratulations, man.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's fun. It's weird talking about, because it is a niche and a niche. Like you go to a game store, you go to any store right now, and you look on the magazine shelves, and you're not even going to find a gaming magazine anymore. There's like one, right? Like a Fortnite magazine, and nothing else exists, because it's one of those mediums that, slowly go away. But what we're finding is a lot of people still do like the tangible. And it's kind of just different, because it's focused on, you can look through any of our magazines, and if you're on Twitter at all in the VR community, you will recognize, most of the people who are in the magazine are right for the magazine. So it's a really good a building block amongst the community, and it's just something that's going to be really cool 5-6 years from now to come back and look and just see, what people were working on and kind of how we've progressed in that time frame.
Here's an interesting takeaway too from what you said. As we continue into extended reality, does that create a larger premium on actual real experiences, real physical things?
Yeah, I think so. I think it could, absolutely. I think, I think as for myself, as technology advances and I spend this much time in VR and just everything that's going on with the world of, getting 200 emails a day and apps, and also I feel like taking a step back and like going back to just that nostalgic is nice. And it seems like a nice getaway for me, and I'm not specifically talking about the magazine. I'm talking about, something simply as sitting on a couch and looking at a book, or, playing a board game with your friends and families. I think that, I can look at my nephews and stuff that are in their teens and stuff now, and like they have no desire to just sit and have those sort of interactions. And I feel like those are going to be, more sought after experiences in the future as we just go towards more of a digital and virtual and a built metaverse, which is fine. I think they can work together in their own ways, but I think people are going to start looking at these things a little differently.
Yeah, I think it's already happening to some extent. We've seen unplugged culture become a thing, and people needing some sort of dopamine detox as a result of spending so much time online, and especially in social channels where we're all chasing some sort of validation. And VR takes that to a different level. And when you're actually immersed in a world that your brain can't tell the difference between what's real and what's not. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right when you talk about having that premium on real physical experiences and goods, because I think it's already moving in that direction.
Yeah, and I can't wait till, we talk about VR and we talk about the space and we talk about that sort of, but it's going to be really neat in the future when, you're in VR and you're playing a specific game or a specific experience, and you see something in there and you're like, oh, this is really neat. And then you can highlight it within VR and purchase it, and then you have a virtual or a physical product show up at your house, right? I think there's ways for all this, for a good, I don't know what the word is, for both these things to work together. But I really feel like at the end of the day, and not just because I create a physical magazine, but I still feel that, people appreciate the tangible, right? And I feel like being nostalgic is something that will always be there. I think what you're nostalgic about will change, but I feel like there will always be people looking to kind of step back and step back into what they remember from being a kid, or an easier time in their life, or whatever the case may be. So it's interesting with just how much information and how much, even with VR, how you can kind of recreate experiences, just what that's going to look like in the future.
Here. Who do you guys think will be one of the first brands to really effectively use XR commerce to both experience and then purchase in the real world? My money's on Wayfair.
Well, when you look at stuff like that, you think 5 years ago, 4 years ago, IKEA put out a VR app where you could go in and look at kitchen projects and build your own kitchen and like look around the kitchen. And then if you liked sort of stuff, you could literally click a button and it took you to the web page to purchase those items. You know, so
IKEA has definitely been a front runner.
Yeah, so I feel like, Wayfair, it makes sense, right? Like, here's a virtual house, build it the way you want, and then if you like any of these items, or augmented reality, and you can purchase them through that route. But yeah, man, that'll be interesting to see. I'm waiting for that. I'm waiting for what companies really gonna. I mean, we have a lot of companies investing in VR from different aspects, like like Facebook and HTC and that sort of stuff. But who in that sort of space is going to come in and just disrupt the industry, right? Because it hasn't happened yet. I mean, Mercedes and all these companies they all put out VR experiences with the intent to sell or the intent to show off a product, but no one really said, hey, here's a specific app or platform built to purchase, real world goods within a virtual market. That just hasn't really happened yet. And if it has, I haven't heard about it, and it hasn't caught much traction. So
that's actually what I'm trying to build.
Oh, whoops. Sorry. You should elaborate on top of that, Robert.
Yeah, please. That'd be great.
I just wanted the question to be re-asked after Robert finishes.
Okay. Well, I mean, so that's literally what we're trying to do is, create that space where again, it's about the commerce and the monetization, right? Getting beyond, going somewhere for just an experience, for whether it's I don't know, somebody that wants to do stuff on Etsy, or whether it's a mall, or whether it's some other retail sort of brand. It's it's one thing if I've got IKEA furniture in my living room or something, but it's entirely something different if I'm in a 3D space and I see something and I want it and I buy that 3D thing, and then later on I get it in the mail. I think that's the important crossover piece there. And I don't know that the brands or any of the bigger hardware tech companies are going to take the lead on this, because it's too centric, right? If say L'Oreal or somebody or Mercedes is like, oh, we're going to make it possible to do all this sort of fun stuff. That's cool if you're interested in buying their stuff specifically. But I think for all of commerce and 3D and shopping and monetization to really kick off at a large scale, you need to have one or more AR, VR, Metaverse platforms out there that enable consumer brands to come in, set up shop, and immediately start selling to consumers. But also you need the same thing for the actual consumer to sell to other consumers. I think that's really the big aha moment is when I could be an Amazon reseller, I could have an Etsy account, or whatever. But if I can go and be selling things, through Metaverse application A, B, or C, I think that's kind of like the big door opener. And that's really what we fundamentally want to build, is the ability to enable and facilitate other people, buy, selling, and trading in Metaverse spaces.
So, Michael, it was a question that you had launched, right?
Yeah. Were you follow up on that?
Oh, okay. Here, if we could just restate the question. So what I understood it to be was, what do you see, and then, because basically, because the last two contributions, I kind of got distracted from the core root of the question. So if you could re-ask that part, that was like, what do you see blank blank?
Oh, geez. I think the thing that I said was something about extended reality increasing, and that creating a premium on actual real experiences, something to that effect. Yeah.
What is everyone? I'm just curious. I've been listening a lot in this conversation because it is good to, do more reflection. At least from my end, at the point where I am at. So I was curious what other people thought about LBEs. Oh, someone left?
Yeah, we lost Ian for a second, but he's back now.
Oh, there we go.
You're talking about location-based experiences,
Yeah.
the arcades and that sort of thing.
Yes.
So we work pretty closely with Springboard, right, which is now owned by Vertigo Games, and they represent a large majority of all the VR arcades. Their platform for licensing out games and and keeping track of times and that sort of thing. So every issue we put in an article about, LBEs and what they're doing to kind of, especially going through the pandemic, right? What kind of pivots they had to make to kind of stay in business and keep things going. And for me personally, it would be a really hard sell for me to invest or want to start an LBE right now. However, I think there's a big difference between people just running their own VR arcades and then companies that are putting together experiences. Like when you go to a premium LBE and you can try out the new Far Cry game, or back when the Voids had all their Voids up, and kind of those premium VR experiences. I think those hold a lot of those hold a lot of validity and value. But I think just standalone VR arcades, I think they're great. But as VR becomes more accessible and more affordable, I think it's kind of a hard, unless you have a specific community or a specific way to keep those guys coming back. I think it's going to become a little bit of a harder sell as time goes on. We all used to go to Target to play N64 and PlayStation when we couldn't afford one, and then as they became more affordable, we all had one. You notice that there's none of those demo type units at stores like that anymore, because there's just no need for them. And I feel like the LBE might head that way in the future. I still see value from a party perspective and holding events, and I think that's really where they can kind of flourish is if you get a lot of these LBs that hold weekly events, and they hold leagues, kind of like a bowling alley, where you go there every week and you're playing a game against another team, and kind of fostering that sort of community. But I think the LBE has a lot of evolution to go through to kind of establish themselves as I guess something that's a little more viable in the long run, with as quickly as VR is right now. Anyway, as quickly as it's evolving with new headsets and new gear and new games and that sort of stuff. And that's my personal take on it. I have a local VR arcade that I still
just got kicked off, but maybe not.
Yeah.
The only one I've been to more than once was actually an arena VR experience, where they took over a whole department store that had been abandoned, and they turned it into almost like this football field size first-person shooter arena game, and it was amazing. They had leagues and championships, and we actually formed teams. It was like ultimate frisbee in college. You'd actually go and practice, which was a ton of fun. But I've never done that before, and I don't really see a whole lot of other opportunities to do that for standard games. And when it comes to VR arcades, I think we saw the same thing that happened in China when they got huge. You couldn't anywhere at any mall and not see a VR arcade. And then a couple of years ago when I went to go look for a few, and there were like 2 in the whole city, because people realized we don't need this. Like we can do this at home.
Yeah, I think the large scale LBs is where it's at right now, because that does offer a unique experience. And there are some companies, like Ryan from Space Pirate Trainer, their arena game that's coming out will kind of give users at home the ability to emulate that on the Quest, which is going to be amazing. If you haven't had an opportunity to kind of look and learn about that, it's pretty incredible what he was able to do. But yeah, I think those premium experiences, like I mentioned, were like the Far Cry experience that you can only try in these large scale LBE arenas. I think that's where, kind of that's where that premium experience lies. And those guys have a little bit more foot to stand on, because there is nowhere else you can go to capture that content. You can't go play Far Cry anywhere except for these locations. And there is like a Star Wars one, and there's all these different ones that are coming out that are premium to a certain arena. And unless you're in a location where you can just drive and go try that, there's no way for me to play Far Cry unless I fly to Los Angeles or somewhere that has the setup for it. And that stuff excites me, because think about the premium experiences that that haven't came out yet, that are going to come out, and they're going to become really premium, where it's like, hey, here's a franchise, here's a VR experience in a large space, but if you want to have this experience, you're going to pay for it and you have to get here to do it. I think that adds a little bit of exclusivity, and I think deep down people really like that. Say they got to try something that not a lot of people got to try. So I definitely see the value in that sort of thing. But yeah, it's always interesting to see just kind of how that industry is going to unfold.
I would almost argue though that that's it's self-defeating to some degree. I mean, when you think about VR arcades, location-based stuff. I mean, there's you guys mentioned a couple of different use cases and examples. From the big premium experience, it's like the old BattleTech arenas, back in the day, or more importantly, it's like going to Disneyland, right? You're going to pay a lot of money, you're going to go have a fun experience, but you're limited in terms of what your throughput is per day. So there's already like a money revenue cap on it, which now makes the business model a little questionable unless you've got a lot of capital. Mm-hmm. And then even like with the Voids, you got to keep reinvesting to switch up the experience to keep people coming back. But you're vastly limiting your overall market size because you are so premium, and you can only go to this place or this place. But on a smaller scale, with like regular VR arcades, I mean, this is kind of where I guess I cut my teeth. In the early days, I was working on pretty much the first multi-user VR arcade game, and we sold them like hotcakes for a long time. But there was a lot of issues back in those days with the hardware, or people sweating in them, and again, throughput and other sort of stuff. And kind of now, arcades are still flopping around, and maybe you've got even busters or whatever. But I think these almost kind of need to be rethought a little bit. Let's take a little bit of the arcade, a little bit of the net cafe, a little bit of your local gaming store. Let's all go and play kind of at the same time. Build in some esports sort of stuff. I think you have to have multiple experiences or capabilities, and again, supported with, like you guys said, some leagues or some events or some other things. But
yeah, did you guys notice that Walmart, all the Walmarts, they had like a few hundred Walmarts integrate a esports gaming space within their stores?
Yeah, well, this is where I think things are going. Where there's the expanded experiences, and then on top of that too, if you think about, or where I like to think about, this metaverse stuff is ultimately going. I think there's going to be a point in time where we're going to have 3D scanning booths, kind of at places like VR arcades where I can go in and get that full body scan and get a more customized avatar or some other sort of standard. I know a few places have kind of tried this already, but there's just not the platform for it. Maybe they're not adoption yet, but I think at some point in the future, just like you might go to the mall and get your glamour shots, you're probably going to go and get an avatar
3D avatar scan. Yeah, I did that at the Holodeck in Seattle, and it was an amazing experience, and it was a lot quicker than I thought it would be. The process itself took 10 minutes maybe, and then it just renders things out and spits out an FBX that you can then import into VR chat or whatever. But yeah, I think that's going to be I think that's huge, and there were companies that were doing that. What was that company that Paris Hilton started, or was a big investor in, and they were trying to 3D scan all the big celebrities that you could then buy and then use within VR. Staramba, do you guys remember that?
No, but I'd like to.
Oh gosh, man. They created a big platform where you could go and buy like famous soccer players, right? And you could buy a 3D perfect scan of them to use however you want. And I used to hear about it all the time. And then they just, I don't know if they're still there. I think they went, 2018 was the last real post I can see from them. They create 3D avatars that you can shop with and use. But anyway, so I think companies are doing this. I think we're still at that point in VR. And I said this, I say this all the time because I always reference like games and experiences and companies that started 4 or 5 years ago in VR, that it's just still ahead of its time, right? The tech's there, the usability is not there, and like people don't know how to utilize it. The average consumer doesn't know how to utilize it quite yet. Mm-hmm. So it just doesn't have that use case. Like when VReal was a company, VReal was doing something really amazing in VR that I thought was going to change the way people create content in virtual reality. But there just wasn't enough people who understood the value of it and understood its full capabilities. And, they're no longer a thing, and we've seen a lot of VR companies come and go because they create these ideas and experiences, but they're just a little too ahead of their time for the average user.
Yeah, that's the ultimate metaverse curse, though, isn't it? Being too early.
Yeah.
Well,
Hey,
we've been
so
actually going for about an hour and a half. I don't know if there are any other questions or pieces people want to address. I know, Dev, you were kind of chiming in right before I started going on.
right, yeah, because this is wrapping up. Yeah, so I'm going to give my summary of thoughts. So in contrast to some of the discussion here, I'm extremely pro NFT and NFT as a stepping stone and NFT as a utility. It's really critical. So the way I look at it is I'm about to drive to Southern California from San Francisco Bay Area, and all I have to do is NFT my trip, and it'll pay for my gas. So I'm a little bit more hyper focused in perhaps the utility that this brings. So that's maybe in contrast to some of the statements here that I was hearing, but I do still subscribe to some of the ethos of those statements. And then okay, so these are the last summary thoughts. I think that with respect to LBEs, I think you can outsource your CapEx intensive to have haptics. So you can basically not outsource, but basically the unit economics works very well when you have, because it's a reoccurring revenue stream, right? So because they don't leave with any of the equipment, you can just basically you've got the right economics term or financial term, but shift off that cost to the consumer per day, per month, right? So that's what I think LBEs bring with respect to haptics. And then there was one last comment I had. So bullish on NFTs, bearish on volumetric and what was featured at the developer conference at Apple. I think that was kind of a smoke show of like, oh, well, we tried. To me, it was like a false shoulder. It was like, well, we don't really care to do all of the feature set that XR can provide. We'll just give you this like photogrammetry, like hors d'oeuvre that is like kind of like, like we'll just crush the apps that already do that in our app store, which is what they did with Tile and the AirTag. So I looked at it actually. I was pretty negative on the photogrammetry aspect of this conversation. So I was just trying to break down my thinking for the whole hour and a half. I'm jumping after Michael finishes.
No, it's all good. Everybody's allowed to have their different ideas. You would have been welcome to chime in and offer any dissenting thoughts at any point, realistically. At any rate,
to your point.
Go ahead.
To your point about the photogrammetry, I feel you on. So this is where I'd love to have a conversation because it'd be really fun to have two opposing perspectives. I think it always makes a panel super fun and interesting. Mm-hmm. There's nothing worse than a panel of everybody saying, "Yeah." There's nothing more boring than a panel of, "Yeah, I agree with what they said," and then silence. Doug, Ken, to your point about kind of like the wah-wah, like everybody really is hoping for volumetric video and things like that. And I'm with you on that. I think that's still a ways away before Apple figures that out to make it part of the platform. But the reason I'm actually bullish on the photogrammetry portion is, yes, it is. They are killing some apps that are already doing that. But to me, it goes far beyond that. The photogrammetry workflow, for those who aren't really familiar with it, is pretty arduous. Like there's a lot to learn. That it does simplify, and then it also makes it possible to implement photogrammetry within other apps too. So I can actually start to incorporate that within an app that I'm developing that may allow you to start to.
Damn it!
Did we lose you?
To start to when he comes back. Damn it! I wanted to hear that.
he'll pop back out, I imagine. But at the same time, yeah, I'm glad you came in and joined us and talked a little bit and offered some of your thoughts. I actually do like the art side of the NFT stuff, the smart contract, content distribution, monetization. opportunities that are afforded by that, I'm completely in support of all of it. I just don't like some of the hype aspects that pushed so much attention towards just like a narrow subset of players.
Isn't that? But it's still in line with the Gartner hype cycle curve, right?
Oh,
So I don't.
I agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like kind of like, okay, whatever. That's a Gartner hype cycle happening in real life in time. So I shrug it off, or I shrug it off. All right. Well, I got to jump. So
Ian just popped
see y'all.
back in. Yeah.
Oh, he did. Okay.
Do you want to finish what you were saying, Ian?
Yeah, as I was saying, so like you'd be able to, let's say there's an opportunity for you to implement something in the game. You go and you scan whatever object it's going to be. It could be a loaf of bread for the table for a fruit spread or something. It could be a stool, whatever it's going to be, something that's close by you, and then you can incorporate that into the experience. That could just be one of a billion different applications to it. So I think that what it's done is extended the availability of photogrammetry to like one layer closer to the consumer, more so than it created this, a massively new tool set. And I think that if I'm right, that's where I sense your disappointment was, which I completely agree with you. I think there's more that they could have done in terms of where they took that and they chose not to. But I do see some really interesting utility around what developers will now be able to do with that stuff.
Okay, that's pretty cool. I just became slightly less bearish. Maybe let's say whatever the medium is between a bull and a bear. Let's say, and a Blair. So I like that democratization and lowering accessibility. I really like that. And then play to earn, I think, was somewhere in what you were saying. So I think that's fascinating. So nice. I get to be less bearish. I gotta jump.
Cheers.
We'll wrap it up for today. I do appreciate everybody coming in, hanging out for this Father's Day Sunday afternoon to talk a little bit about crypto and a little bit about extended reality and the different projects that you guys are offering everyone. Do you want to say
awesome. Thanks for inviting us together.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, guys.
For sure. Well, I appreciate it. And you can look for us across the web. I will distribute this on the audio format in a week or so.